And I think that the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves.
One thing scientists do agree on is that there is little chance this virus was released as the result of a laboratory accident.
You've probably heard lots of bits of information about coronavirus.
The virus originated in China. Genetic evidence collected from a child who was infected with COVID-19 in Italy in December 2019 and from a man in France who tested positive in the same month indicate that the virus was spreading earlier than first thought. The WHO scientists emphasize that their mission is not a blame game.
I think what's important to stress about the mission is that we are not looking for a guilty country or something like that. Spillover events from animals to humans happen all the time, even here in Germany. So the big scope is to try to find out what happened, so how the virus jumped from which animal to perhaps an intermediate host and then to humans, to reconstruct this scenario.
We have to ask the tough questions now, but we need the ability and the authority and the access to get to the bottom of this.
But I'm just curious to know if you think that we will ever definitively know the true origin of the virus, and how important is that discovery?
Yeah, I think that there's a good chance that we'll know. So if it was both naturally occurring, which it is, and naturally transmitted, let's say from the market down the street, we may never be able to prove that. There won't be a typhoid Mary, so to speak, that we can, zero in on and talk to. But if it was released from the lab in the alternative, intentionally or otherwise, we should be able to find evidence of that. I believe that's what our intelligence community is looking at now. You can talk to lab officials that may be disgruntled, doctors that worked at the lab that were observing their practices. One of the first key questions they'll have to ask is whether that lab was actually looking at and performing research on this virus. So we'll determine that, and then we'll determine through investigation. And if there is some link to the lab, we'll find it over time.
And we will not stop from knowing the truth on the origin of the virus, but based on science.
Their mission will start in the city of Wuhan, where the first cases of COVID-19 were reported in late 2019. But it's still not clear if the virus originated in the central Chinese city, or if it was brought in from elsewhere.
China has always said it has acted openly and transparently when it comes to COVID-19. Well, this is the sort of openness and transparency you tend to find when you come to these places. It's what any investigation into the origins of the virus is up against.
More men come, more blocked roads, more blank stares.
We're done. We're tired of this.
But it will happen. There's no doubt it will happen.
The scientists and the WHO are also urging patience as they search for the origin of SARS-CoV-2. It is a hunt for a killer that could take many years.
We have now the tools that allows us to look at the genetic makeup of these viruses. And when we look at our virus, the COVID-19 virus, there is nothing in its makeup that would indicate that it has been manufactured. It's clearly a natural virus, and there are many of these around. We have seen several of them in the past, so in itself it's not a surprise. Laboratory accidents happen, unfortunately, once in a while. It has happened many times in the past. And of course, it's even a remote possibility. We have to look at this as a possibility. So we will, of course, also look at that hypothesis among many others, even if it's an unlikely one. There is no evidence so far indicating that anybody was working with this virus in the past. There is no evidence to indicate that it would have escaped a laboratory in any way. But of course, we will have that in mind when we look at the origin of this virus.
Starting on the human side, checking if there are stored serum samples, perhaps swabs from symptomatic people from the months before the first known case. So trying then to see where that track leads us, if it's another city or if it stays in Wuhan or where that goes.
We've come here with a question. After all this time, after so many dead, how do we still not know where it came from?
Others are on the hunt
for its origin. While the first confirmed case was in China, the exact steps of the virus's early progression are still unknown.
The intermediary animal is still a mystery.
It will be a long, winding way to the truth, and there is no assurance it will ever be found. And these caves hide bats, and those bats carry coronaviruses.
Virus hunters had to sample feces, urine, and blood from thousands of bats across the country to find a genetic match. Hunting viruses is a time-consuming and expensive endeavor, and while technology has improved in the last 17 years, there still aren't many shortcuts to the detective work of tracing a virus.
It might seem odd that journalists find it so difficult to report on the science that took place.
The UK's ambassador to China has spoken about her government's desire to see a shared understanding of the origins of this virus grounded in science. But at the same time, I've heard from very senior foreign diplomatic voices who express a deep pessimism about an investigation that they fear will be tarnished from the very outset by political interference from Beijing. The signs from China's state media are not encouraging. They are reporting heavily contested claims of COVID in other countries before it was here in China. One prominent senior reporter just today is stating as fact that there were cases in Spain in March of 2019. It's all part of an ongoing effort to cast doubt on the overwhelmingly supported conclusion that it started in humans here in China.
We should wish them well, but the problem is there are structural flaws in the terms of reference of the investigation itself that I believe will make it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get to the bottom of what happened. And that's what we need. I mean, this is very difficult. It's very painful for everybody. I am certainly not an advocate. I hope that this isn't a laboratory leak, because that would be a terrible outcome. It would be awful if almost 2 million people were dead because of an avoidable accident. But just like when a plane crashes, we ask the tough questions. Why?
Some of it's true, but some of it is so misleading.
I would like to assure you that WHO's position is very, very clear. We need to know the origin of this virus. But
the idea that it came from a lab is an accusation without any evidence, whereas there's plenty of scientific evidence which tells us that this is from nature, as is MERS coronavirus and the SARS coronavirus before it.
There's a third theory as well, that it occurred naturally but then accidentally escaped a Wuhan lab.
China has repeatedly lashed out at such claims. Beijing says there is no evidence that suggests the virus was accidentally released from the Wuhan Institute of Virology and then into the human population. But some experts say it did.
In a cave somewhere down there some years ago. But all of this may be proof that China has now decided it needs to control anything that may relate in any way at all to the question of the origin of the virus.
Different reasons. Often international global elites are working to undermine the sovereignty and the will of national communities. And those elites include mainstream politicians in their own countries.
For shooting at the civilians. Yeah, it seems like something they'd do and be told and ordered to do to protect it from getting out, to keep the evidence hidden. If a place was riddled with disease, when a virus like this happens, you quarantine that area. When you start killing people, it's more because they're witnesses.
Okay.
Bioterror there's always the potential for bioterror. How you approach engineered microbe surveillance mechanisms to determine if there's anything out there in society that could be used in a bioterror situation.
It's the big one, the scandal we've been dreading. Billy, something's in the air, and the public, everyone is painfully aware. It's the kind of story everyone will share. The numbers keep on growing, you can see where this is going. We are paying for a hideous mistake.
Bioterror there's always the potential for bioterror.
It's a ticking clock that's counting down an outbreak.
Well, the US says it's looking into what many have called a conspiracy theory.
And I think that the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves.
It's a ticking clock that's counting down an outbreak. Every day another case, outbreak. At a terrifying pace, outbreak. When's it gonna stop? What's it gonna take? An outbreak, outbreak, outbreak.